So this is Abby, Tressie, and Malia, and we are going over phylum annelids. So their distinguishing characteristics. So first off, annelids have segments in their body because the internal and external features are repeated in each segment. You can see close-up examples of this in all images, but they're really pointed out in the first image. Metamerism allows the annelids to become bigger by adding compartments and makes their movement more efficient. They have bilateral symmetry, meaning if we were to cut an earthworm, for example, in half, we would get two identical halves. Their body can be divided into three different parts: the head, the body, and the flagellum, which is also known as the tail. The clitellum is a large band that is across the body that is made up of reproductive segments, which allows sperm to transfer and gives a rise to a cocoon where fertilization occurs. You can see this in the second image. Annelids are triploblastic, which means all three germ layers are shown in the embryo. Their body is covered in a thin cuticle to protect the skin and to keep it moist. This allows the annelid to absorb the oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. Finally, you can most commonly find these in moist environments.
Now we're going to talk about some important subgroups of annelids. The first important subgroup are marine worms or polychaetes. The word polychaete itself means many bristles. So this means that the marine worms have many bristles. You can see this in picture A, where all the bristles are segmented along the body. Some species of marine worms burrow through the mud and extract organic material from it. Tube worms use sand grains and limestone to make a tube to live in with just their tentacles exposed. The small particles of food are trapped in the mucus on the tentacles and transported to the worm's mouth, and this is how they get their nutrients. The second important subgroup are terrestrial worms, oligochaetes. Oligochaete means to have few bristles, so these worms do not have as many bristles as the polychaetes do. Terrestrial worms are commonly known as earthworms and nightcrawlers. These are the annelids that you're most likely to see when you're walking around outside, and these are the ones that students are going to be most familiar with when they come to the classroom. These worms emerge from their burrows on rainy nights to crawl across the surface of the ground. There are more than 4,000 species of earthworms, and they can range in size from 1 centimeter to 2 to 3 meters in length. As an earthworm burrows, it consumes particles of soil and organic material. It is then digested as it passes through the worm's one-way gut. The fecal material is called castings. These are valued by gardeners as soil supplements. An interesting fact is that an earthworm can produce its own weight in castings every day. And these three pictures are examples of earthworms, and these would be when you show them to students what they would see and recognize as worms. The third important subgroup are leeches. Leeches have segmented bodies, and more than half of the leech species are predators. One example of these predators is the horse leech, and that is the middle picture. And what they feed on are smaller annelid worms, snails, and aquatic insect larvae.
Evolutionary history of annelids. Fossil evidence. Annelid fossils are rare to find, mainly because annelids are soft tissues and most fossils are of hard matter, which annelids are not. When annelids are found, they mostly consist of jaws and calcified dwelling tubes. In the photo, this is under the circumstances where everything fit just right and you can actually see what an annelid would look like in a fossil format. Some of the earlier annelid fossils are found in Canada dating back 505 million years ago. The explanation of annelids was a complicated one for me to learn personally. So there were two competing hypotheses of what an ancestor of an annelid was. So the first hypothesis was that the ciliate body plan evolved first and that the annelid ancestor was a simple burrowing organism. As in the photo on the left, it shows how they're kind of just small and they would burrow in the dirt. The second hypothesis was that the polychaetes had the most primitive body plan and that the annelid ancestor was active and lived on the seafloor, as on the photo on the right where they have their little bristles and they would move around. So DNA evidence showed that the common ancestor of annelids had a polychaete body-like plan, so the second hypothesis was correct. So for the celiac groups, it was divided into the olichaetes and their herdinia, which are earthworms and leeches, as was stated earlier in the slides. For the polychaete groups, they're divided into two natural groups, the Arietia and the Sedentaria. The Arietia included worms with active and often predatory lifestyles, which have diverse head appendages for sensing their environment, as the photo on the right with their little notches on the top of their head so they can move around. And then sedentary comprises of more sedentary animals with pops adapted for feeding, as the photo on the left.
Okay, so moving on to their ecological significance. Our most common annelid, like we said, the earthworm or the nightcrawler, those burrowing annelids have the important role to help organic matter decompose. This is extremely important to agriculture as they take in the nutrients. The nitrogen they cast is readily available to help plants grow. And as we learned before, that they cast almost the same size of themselves. So this is really important and helpful to the soil underneath them. This also allows the soil to be fertile, and it's extremely important for our agriculture. Annelids also provide humans with bait for fishing, and they're a source for food for animals such as birds and mammals.
And then a topic of interest that we found with annelids had to do with one of our subgroup leeches, and it's actually called leaching. And leaching is used in the medical field to restore blood flow to areas of damaged veins after an appendage has been reattached or there's been a tissue graft. And so what they do is they put the leech on your skin, and the saliva of the leech actually acts as an anesthetic on the skin, so you don't feel any pain. And then where the area around where they bite, those blood vessels become dilated so that the blood can rush in faster. And since they're dilated, that helps restore the blood flow faster. And then you can see in the picture on the left, you can see how they just kind of set the leech down and it attaches. And then on the right, you can see how they just sit there. And then this is our works cited page.